Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, the German ideology. The German ideology is a foundational text for Marxist theory written around about 1845 to 46. However, it was only published much later. The work is a critique of the philosophy of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels' contemporaries, particularly the young Hegelians and their idealistic interpretation of history. The German ideology is significant for laying out several key components of Marxist theory, including the materialist conception of history, the nature of the state and ideology, and an analysis of capitalist society. So the text itself, over 700 pages long, picks up where the economic and philosophic manuscripts left off. In its pages, one sees not only the continued settling of accounts with the German philosophic tradition, but the beginnings of what would become a distinctly Marxist vision of the social world created by industrial capitalism. In this particular selection, Marx and Engels take aim at certain exponents of the Hegelian idealism, and they do so with a certain caustic flair, as their writing always shows, comparing the philosophical idealists known as the young Hegelians with a person who thinks that people drown because they are possessed with the idea of gravity. In their discussion of the production of consciousness, they begin to lay the foundations for an alternative materialist theory of historical development. Here they part ways with Feuerbach's version of materialism, which they find wanting because it is rooted in nature and not in history. It is important that I read a few lines from the text so that you get a sense of what we're dealing with. So they say, here the two men have constantly made up for themselves false conceptions about themselves, about what they are and what they ought to be. They've arranged their relationships according to the ideas of God, of normal man, etc. The phantoms of their brains have got out of their hands. They, the creators, have bowed down before their creations. Let us liberate them from the ideas, dogmas, imaginary beings under the yoke of which they are pining away. Let us revolt against the rule of thoughts. Let us teach men, says one, to exchange these imaginations for thoughts which corresponds to the essence of man, says the second. To take up a critical attitude to them, says the third. To knock them out of their heads and existing reality will collapse. These innocent and childlike fancies are the kernel of the young Hegelian philosophy, which not only is received by the German public with horror and awe, but is announced by our philosophic heroes with a solemn consciousness of its cataclysmic dangerousness and criminal ruthlessness. The first volume of the present publication has the aim of uncloaking these sheep who take themselves and are taken for wolves, of showing how their bleating merely imitates in a philosophic form the conceptions of the German middle class, how the boasting of these philosophic commentators only mirrors the wretchedness of the real conditions in Germany. So a few lines to give you a sense of the caustic nature of the writing. So the premise of the materialist method are foundational to Marxist theory. These premises form the bedrock of historical materialism, which is Marx and Engels' method of studying society, history, and social change. And the first would certainly be the primacy of material, Marx and Engels argued that the material conditions of life, the means of production and the relations of production, are the primary basis for the development of social structures, legal and political institutions, and ideologies. This premise contrasts with the idealist philosophies that sees ideas as the primary driving force in societal development. Second would certainly be the historical development through class struggle. So, a central premise is that history is a series of class struggles where the economic and political control by one class over another leads to social conflict. This struggle is seen as the engine of historical change, pushing society from one stage of development to another, from feudalism to capitalism, and eventually, as they saw it, towards socialism and communism. Then third would be the social relations determined by production in this new capitalist environment. So for Marx and Engels, they focus on the relations of production, the ways in which people organize themselves to produce goods and services, relations of production. Fundamentally, they argue, shape all other social relations. These relations of production are determined by the development level of productive forces, labor, technology, etc., and in turn form the economic base upon which the superstructure, politics, law, ideology is built. And then fourth would be the role of the economic base and superstructure. So for these two gentlemen, the economic base of society, that is the combination of productive forces and the relations of production, determines the superstructure. The superstructure for them consists of the institutions and ideologies that arise from and justify the base. However, there is also a dialectical interaction where the superstructure can affect the base, albeit the base is considered primary in this shaping of society. Then very simply put, fifth would be the change through dialectical materialism. And what do they mean here? And where do they get it from? Dialectical materialism is inspired by Hegel's dialectics, but based on materialist principles. This premise, these two gentlemen posits that societal change occurs through the conflict of opposites, a type of thesis and an antithesis, leading to a synthesis. For Marx and Engels, this dialectical process is rooted in material conditions and class struggle. Then sixth would certainly be on the factory floor, the alienation under capitalism. So for them, alienation is a key premise in that a key premise is that under capitalism, workers are alienated from the products of their labor, the labor process, their fellow workers, and their own humanity. This alienation is a direct result of the capitalist mode of production, where labor is commodified and the relationships are mediated through commodities. And then finally, historical materialism as a science. So the scientific approach to history that they're offering. Marx and Engels advocate for understanding historical development through a scientific lens, analyzing the material conditions and economic practices that underpin societal changes, rather than attributing historical movement to the ideas of great men or the evolution of spirit. Thus, analyzing societal structures for these two gentlemen, in sum, suggests that these premises underscore that we've highlighted Marx and Engels' shift from abstract philosophical speculation to a concrete analysis of social conditions and history. Historical materialism, as outlined in their work, provides a framework for analyzing societal structures, understanding the dynamics of societal change, and critiquing the capitalist system from a foundation rooted in material conditions and class relations. I hope this gives some clarity on the underpinnings and the basis of Marxism.